pressure there.
Yeah.
Or the man of the hour, Trey.
That's it. That's
Where's
what
the
that's
man
what
of
I
the
like.
year?
Said no one ever. GQ man of the year over there.
GQ. What does GQ stand for?
Not what it traditionally.
No, I mean, that was different in this context.
Great quality.
All right, thanks everybody for showing up here today for our 2025 season-ending media availability with Sporting Director Kurt Schmidt, Head Coach Pablo Mastroeni. As you may have seen the announcement a few minutes ago, both have been signed to multi-year contract extensions. So maybe we'll just start there, first with Kurt, then with Pablo, about what it means to have some continuity and longevity committed to you from the club under the new Miller Sports Entertainment era.
You say start with me?
Yep.
No, it's great. I think you mentioned two words: continuity and longevity, and I think those are two things that do really well in this league. Continuity, longevity, consistency, and for me personally, it's great to have that here. I've been here 5 years now, and just in a personal note, my family loves it here, and we're very happy here, and so I love it here as well, and very happy to stay here longer, and I think really excited to be at this club longer term to continue to build something here and work towards competing and winning championships.
Yeah, and a lot like what Kurt just said, I think continuity is really important. And I think for me, I've been at quite a few clubs over the course of my career as a player and a coach. And the one thing that makes RSL special, I think, are the people here and even the media. I've gotten to know quite a few of you, and you guys ask really good questions. Fan base wants to know a lot of details about why we do what we do. And I think they're fair in their assessment of a lot of things. And so I think as a community and as a club, I think it's really important to have this level of engagement. And then for me personally is obviously that comes with consistently higher expectations. And I think that's, as a coach, it's about learning, it's about growing. It's about taking the lessons, as I ask our players, from this year and parlay that into results and improvement in the following year. And so I'm grateful to be doing it alongside, a great front office, great ownership, and great media personnel and Trey and the rest of his staff. So truly grateful.
DJ. Sorry,
For both of you, how would you characterize this past season? Was this a good year?
You want me to go first? I'll say it was a frustrating year and ultimately disappointing in terms of how we ended up and even just the whole year, right? And it was one of the toughest years that I've had in this league, and I've been in this league for quite a while. So in terms of I don't know what the right word is, but for sure we're disappointed and motivated by the season and motivated to make things better for next year.
Yeah, I'll echo that. And, I think we got off on a really strange start last year with some of the, personnel situations that kind of unfolded beyond our control. And I felt like we were kind of scrambling right from the start with a lot of things. And however, there are also moments where, I'm really proud given how low we were, and yet we found a way as a group to hang in there, believe, and keep fighting. Oftentimes the media was asking me, "This is another must-win game, Pablo, to have a chance." And we're saying, "Yep, we got this. We know what we're capable of." And so I think from a very difficult year, there came about some little success stories. In particular, some players like Gozo, Noel Kaliskin, Diego Luna's of evolution into where. So there's a lot of positives to continue to build on. But to echo Kurt's sentiment, it was frustrating at times. But again, I think, and I talk to the players all the time about this. I go in there, and not every year, but this year in particular, and I ask the guys who here believes that adversity makes you a stronger person and a stronger player, and they all raise their hands. And then I say, how many of you last night before you went to bed prayed for all this adversity? And zero. right? So and the reason why I say that is because I feel like I'm a better coach. I feel like I'm a better manager. I feel like I'm a better person, having gone through the adversity and finding some way towards the end to have a semblance of what we can potentially be moving forward.
You can't air all the dirty laundry, obviously, when you talk to us in this setting. But for people here who watched this club for the last 12 years, since Jason left, and he's obviously back, most of us were at the press conference, the reasons this club has won and lost are pretty crystal clear. And the best playoff run, the only Western Conference final since 2013, there was no ownership, and the league was running the club. And the one time that ownership really went out and spent big money on multiple players, you earned the most points you ever had, scored the most goals you ever had. Have you been able to lay out to the new ownership in a crystal clear way why this club has been who it's been and the hurdles that have to be cleared if they're going to get where they say they want to go?
It's a big question, DJ. Look, I don't know if I can hit that point for point. I think the Millers have come in, and Steve Starks has come in, and it's certainly been part of it's been an education process. Him, myself, Jason. We've had a lot of conversations and have spoken to him about what can happen in this league and ways in which you can find success in this league. And I think one of the interesting things about this league is that there are multiple pathways, right? It's a little bit of a choose your own adventure, right? And within the league's framework and rules, there are many ways to be successful. It's not a league where spend correlates one for one with results, because we force spend into it was 3 and now it's kind of 6 discretionary players, and ultimately that's not a huge part of your roster, and so it can be inefficient if you spend too much money, right? So at the top end, it certainly doesn't correlate, but there's certainly a base level that needs to be achieved, and it certainly comes down to in the key games. So obviously, I don't think when you get to the point where you're in the playoffs and you're playing those must-win games, those championship games, or those knockout games, it does come down to your difference-making players. In some teams, right, those are the most expensive players. Sometimes it's not. But those are things that are clear to us and certainly have been conveyed to whoever I talk to, right? Ownership, new ownership, old ownership, everybody. But as I said before, there's multiple ways to be successful here, and you've seen glimpses of that. Pablo touched on it, right? And guys like Diego Luna and Xavier Gozo and the development that they've undergone, and we saw it with Andres Gomez, and it's maybe easy to forget he was just a young U22 kid that didn't play maybe a whole lot of minutes his first year and kind of exploded his second year. So that player development and that improvement year on year is going to be a big part of our success story as well. So I don't think there's any getting away from that, but we also know, and I think something you can learn from last year is having those pieces around some tentpole players in the squad can be very helpful. And I think we have some of that here. We've tried to add some, and we will try to add more, but we're going to need the mix of both, and we're not just going to go out and buy the best players we can find to go and win everything we can. But you look at a guy like Rafa Cabral, DeAndre Ellen, who we brought in. These are 2 very experienced players that can really help some of our young players mature and develop and become the players that we can rely upon as well. So I don't know if I answered your question, but hopefully I touched on it a little bit, and I think those things have been communicated.
Pablo, have you been able to have really blunt conversations about the things that may or may not have been holding the club back over the last 5 or 6 years?
With Kurt?
With the new owners?
Not directly, DJ. I think now with Jason coming into the fold, he's had a really good beat on what he's been able to witness the last couple of years. And between and we're in daily conversations with Kurt, Jason, myself, and I think it's given me a bit of space to operate and really focus on the staff and the players downstairs, and these guys are always working on the little things, but it's not from a lack of communication. We're I think united in everything that we do moving forward. And that's why it's really exciting for me. I think we have, Kurt, who's been in the league for a long time, Jason, who's been in the league for a long time, guys that know what's successful in this league. And, I think we're really united in the way we want to move forward. I think Kurt did a good job of, expressing the tent pole is really important, I think, for us and for myself in particular, because I think those tent poles end up being coaches on the field. And in a game where you don't have timeouts, and in a game where game management is critical, those tent poles become I think the difference makers. And so I think, learning the lessons from this year, adding, a couple players and then relying on the experience that some of these other players this year have gained will be critical to next year's success.
Speaking of Jason, we had a chance to talk to him last week, and I guess two-parter here, one for you, Kurt, one for Pablo. Two things he harped on was improving transfer windows, saying that the last 3 to 4 have not been great, in his words. And then for you, Pablo, he said a goal is to advance, obviously, past the first round of the playoffs. Has he given you guys any advice or direction on maybe how to achieve those goals, and maybe your thoughts on how to go about doing that?
Yeah, Jason and I have talked a lot about that over the past, almost 2 years now, and some of it is simple, right? But it's manpower, and it's having enough of the right people in place. It's obviously having the right people, but having enough of the right people in place to execute on what we want to execute on. We just talked about the different ways to be successful here, and if we're going to go out and find young players that we can develop, if we're going to go out and find undervalued players, we certainly need to be a little more rigorous in our searching, which requires more people in terms of scouting, video scouting, live scouting, data analytics, and those are things that we need to improve in our recruitment department, and in terms of adding those pieces to increase our reach and our ability to further thoroughly evaluate guys. That being said, obviously we have picked up some I think some good players and some good pieces to build around in those windows as well. So I always maybe I don't know if Trey would agree with this or Paulo. I'm trying to be maybe the glasses half full guy on this one, where like Rafa Cabral is a great piece for us to build around in the future. We've picked up guys like Emeka Nelly maybe was a couple years ago, but Emeka, DeAndre's come in and done really well. Kobe Henry's a good young player we can develop. So we've picked up and guys that I'm not mentioning, but we've picked up some good guys in these windows as well. So I think what I just said, what Pablo just reiterated, the temple pieces that we can build around, and to some extent maybe we've lost. We need to add that. That's the critical part that we're missing.
Yeah, and I think as far as, I think the most important thing for us is always, like the benchmark is getting into the playoffs. Again, you can't win anything unless you're in the playoffs, right? And then, just reflecting on the previous years and how the margins become much thinner in the playoffs, right? I think, I go back to 2022 is, I think, Austin, where we're up 2-0 away from home, and game's completely under control. 60th minute, we get a red card, right? And then we end up losing in penalty kicks in that game. Then I think we go to Houston, and I think it's the same thing, penalty kicks, right? And then we go to Minnesota last year, and it's penalty kicks. And so when you're talking about making it further, we're talking about like the margins being so thin, and the only way, and we've talked about it internally, is like how do we get to the playoffs with the utmost confidence and belief and good run of form? And I think that really is the only way to give yourself the best chance to then, and again, it's really from a belief factor, because if you're thinking about like, you're watching these series now, you're watching the Minnesota, the Seattle series, and it's penalty kicks, it's like, or 1-goal margins, and it's like just so thin. So, I think for us, it's really about going into the playoffs with a full head of steam, full of belief. And I think that's something that's been eluding us, where we've kind of gotten into the playoffs the last couple of years, but it hasn't been with the right type of momentum to take advantage of it. And so, again, I think that's always going to be the benchmark for us. Obviously, we want to continue to improve, and I think the regular season has a big role to play. And so I think if we have a stronger end to the season next year, I think we'll be able to now really talk about how we can make some real gains in the playoffs.
And Classic for me. We spoke to DeAndre Yedlin the other day, and he said that he thinks that one of the most important factors in winning a championship is believing that you are a champion or believing that you can win that championship. Do you think that this club believes that they can win a championship, win a trophy?
I think so. You know, again, and it's kind of, this is probably a terrible analogy, but when you're in 14th place and you have to get to 9th, there's a certain amount of belief that you need to be able to achieve that. And there is no, actually, at that point, there was no reason to believe, given the way the season had gone. But when you set your mind to it, right, and you're in the 14th place, and you got to get to 9th, and you got to go past 5 teams to get there. And the other teams are in better form than we are, but we still believe we can do it. It's the same thing finishing 4th or 5th in the table and winning a championship. So I believe that we have the right character, and again, I think the biggest thing for us is to continue to learn from previous experiences, whether you're a player or a coach, but more importantly, having the right mindset and the momentum once you get in the playoffs to be a champion.
Sean?
This is probably mostly a Kirk question, but I'll let Pablo weigh in if he really wants to. Sort of going back to the Jason promotion last week, does anything change kind of practically, I guess, with your role on the team, what you've been doing for the last couple of years with sort of, I mean, it seems like there's maybe a little bit of a new structure in that department in some ways, or is it mostly business as usual?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. With, you know, Jason obviously didn't show up a week ago. He's been here since the start of 24, and so he and I have, I think, have developed a good working relationship. So I wouldn't say it's a seismic shift from that in terms of, you know, his just how we work together, but his ability to support me in my job and what I'm doing and trying to build put the team together, build the roster, and put us in a position to succeed. I think that's been enhanced, obviously, with his new role and the connection with ownership, and having a soccer person, you know, kind of mediate that a little bit, really, I think really helps me and will help us going forward for sure. You don't want to weigh in.
Let's go to Maddie Casey on Zoom, and then we'll come back in here to Brant.
Gentlemen, congratulations on the new contracts. Very happy for both of you. If I could start with Pablo, in the 2015-2016 off-season window, you pretty famously went over to the Premier League and spent time with Arsenal and Tottenham. And then I believe you did some new coaching badges in Florida after that and had some pretty dramatic results, specifically on the defensive side with Colorado. Do you have any similar plans this winter, or anything you're looking to personally improve with yourself or your staff?
Yeah, no, great question. You know, I've talked to both Kurt and Jay about possibly going abroad this offseason. You know, Diego Simeone, for me, has always been a guy that I've actually had a couple opportunities to go and observe. And, you know, oftentimes we talk about the offensive side of the game, you know, but I think in the last couple of years, we you know, the defensive side is an area that we need to continue to improve upon as well. You know, I think going abroad and just observing how other people work, you know, I think the biggest takeaway for me when I go and observe coaches is you can't take what they do and apply it to your game. You cannot do that. You have to be authentic to who you are and the way you coach, but it's really, what it does is it opens your mind to different ways of doing similar things, right? And different focal points of defending. And maybe it might be more individual specific versus more collective, team collective. And I think that's an area we're reflecting upon this year. I think individually as a team, we have to improve defensively. Whereas collective team concepts, I think we do really well, but it's the individual, it's the 1v1s, it's the 2v2s, it's the 3v3s. And, you know, I think there's no better coach in the world than Simeone at getting these messages across. And so, obviously, there's been no contact. There's been nothing, just preliminary talks. But, you know, I think as a coach, you're always learning, you're always growing, and it's always great to go abroad and observe guys that have been doing it at a real high level for quite some time.
Thank you. And what was your biggest message to the guys going into the offseason that you want them bringing back next year, especially the younger guys, to try and avoid the sophomore slump that we typically see when we got so many young guys on the roster?
Yeah, you know, I think oftentimes, you know, there's always a shout to stay humble. I think this year really humbled all of us, both coaches and players alike. And so I think, and had a couple exit interviews with both, Diego Luna and Gozo, who are both young players, and obviously they have similar trajectories in their careers with the national teams, youth national teams. And my biggest message to those guys in particular is don't forget what got you these opportunities. I think Diego Luna is a player that will always be a talented attacker, but what sets him apart from other attackers, especially when he goes into the national team and especially when he's best with us here at RSL, is his dogged determination to work for the team and his relentless fight and his commitment. And I think the same could be said about Gozo. And so these are two guys that are big time players for us, that staying close to their roots and the work and the effort and the belief that they had in themselves in times where no one really knew who they were are going to be really critical for them coming back into next year and making us whole as a group.
Thank you very much. And Kurt, you spoke a few minutes ago to DJ about maybe the thin ranks in the scouting department. Can we talk a little bit about Nate Miller moving up, and how the team's going to look at replacing his spot if you're looking internally with somebody like Lowry, or if you're looking abroad?
Well, I mean, again, Nate wasn't, just to clarify for anyone who doesn't know, but Nate wasn't a scout. He was on Pablo's staff. But yeah, I mean, look, we're looking to fill that that hole that's left when Nate's gone. And Pablo, Jason, myself, we're having a lot of conversations about the right candidate and the right structure and the right skill set to complement what we have and enhance us going forward.
Has there been any has there been any discussion of expanding the technical staff to include a set piece coach or a specialist, given the struggles on both sides of corner kicks?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about set pieces, and one pathway is to have a dedicated set piece coach and expand the staff to encompass that. But even whether or not that's the path we go, for absolutely more time and more deliberate care in that area is really critical to us going forward. It's clearly an area where coaching can have an outsized impact on that part of the game versus some of the rest of the game, and so we see it as a place where we can use leverage to get a bigger impact on the field. And whether that's someone whose full-time job is doing that, or it's going to be half of this guy's job and half of that guy's job, offense, defense, we're talking through those things. But without a doubt, we're going to spend a lot more time and throw more manpower at that area of the game. And I mean, I'm even pushing Pablo on long throws, so we'll incorporate that as well.
I mean, you had to assume that's why you brought DeAndre in, right? Long throws specifically and only. We spoke after the winter window, and we talked specifically about money not necessarily equaling success. And at the time we were talking about Toronto, but I guess now we can throw Atlanta into that conversation. But it's
tough to pass judgment on anything that they haven't done or haven't yet chosen not to do yet, if that makes sense with that triple negative. But I think it's just fair to wait and evaluate what the support that they want to throw into it and how they choose to invest in the team. But I think that it's my job, it's Pablo's job, the scouting department's job to be ready and to maximize whatever we have, right? And that's something that needs to improve, honestly, and that will improve. But I would say probably wait to those fans.
Fair. And then last one for me, after your exit interviews with players and staff, what would you say your main roster priorities are this offseason? Is it certain positions or certain characteristics that you're looking for?
I think the team needs to get better in all phases, to be honest. Certainly coaching will have a big impact on that, but personnel as well. So when we're looking to strengthen the roster, we are looking at all areas of the team. The clearest area where we were deficient throughout this season was in the attack, was in the quantity, the quality of chances we created, and our ability to convert those chances into goals, even when we did create high quality chances. And so obviously that's a clear need, right? Someone who can create and or finish chances is massive. Victor came in, and in a short time I thought was pretty productive and did really well. But this is the problem with our summer window is there's only so much of the regular season left once it opens, and so it was a short glimpse. Now the good news for us is I think as he settles into the league, he's probably gonna get more comfortable and be more effective. But I think it's that was a positive sign to see what he can do, and it's about getting him and others that service up top. Gozo, he did. He had a decent year in terms of production. He can do better. He actually said that to us. He knows he can do better, but that's not to throw too many expectations on him. He's just a guy that's developing, and he did great for his age and his experience level. And with his work rate and his mentality, he'll improve next year, and that will get better as well. So, but with those players in the attack, we need to give them service. We need to create chances. We need to be better in that area of the field. And again, some of it's personnel, some of it's going to be coaching and game model and how we attack and how we finish plays in the final third. Because we were doing a good job this year of getting to the final third. It's just about how we finish those plays in the final third that needs to improve. And then look, defensively, it's really interesting as we look at the season, and do some analysis on it. And in terms of what we want to do in our game model and the metrics that track those things, we actually did really well in a lot of those areas, with one key exception, which is the ability just to recover the ball. And that was kind of all over the field and in all aspects. So, we were putting pressure, we were defending high, we were disrupting the opponent, but when in that critical moment to execute and to recover the ball, to make the tackle, to block the shot, to win the header, those are the areas where we struggled this year. So whether it's, guys that are here now or guys that we bring in, the execution is going to be better next year.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt.
Brant? How much of the off-season, preseason ownership change was a hindrance to the roster build this season, and how will the new owners open that up moving forward?
I think hindrance is a heavy word. I think we again, with whatever funds or opportunities for support is available to us, we're going to maximize. And that's what we tried to do in these two windows. And yes, I think having new owners come in, always that necessitates some changes. Could be changes in funding, could be changes in structure, leadership, management, the day-to-day even. And so we have to navigate all those things, and the more settled that is, and to harken back to the beginning of this conference, we talked about continuity and consistency. So the more that settles in, then the more we'll be able to work within the framework that we have and maximize what we have to get.
In this offseason, you have an opportunity to make some changes to the roster. Is this a tinker around the edges offseason, or does there need to be a little bit more of a rebuild? You probably can't be happy with the DP production and the amount you're spending on DPs and the return on investment there. What are your thoughts on the roster build this offseason?
I don't think it's either one of those, to be honest. As much as I think as much disappointment as there was this year, and in terms of where we finished, in terms of results, in terms of the attack, there are some good pieces here, some good bones here, and we were able to get to a point where we put ourselves in a position to compete for a championship. Now, 9th place is not where we want to be, and that's not where we expect to be going forward. But it's worth noting that we had enough quality to get us to that stage, right? Now we need to build on top of that. So I wouldn't call it a full rebuild. I wouldn't call it a tinker around the edges, because when you're looking for a 10-pole player or players to develop young ones around, that's not really a tinker. That's a bit bigger, but it's also not a full rebuild where I think we've got to change 15 players.
Were you both happy with the DP production, or is that something that really needs to be addressed? No, it's not a mystery. Those
players have their designations are public, their goals and assists are public, and certainly we expect. I think sometimes it's unfair to just to judge people based on that roster designation. I think our whole attack needs to produce more, but certainly when we do invest that money, yes, those players need to produce more than players who have less money invested in them. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think also, given the production from 2024 in one of those positions to 2025, it's pretty stark, and I think that's where I think a lot of our frustrations came from. But again, I think it's really clear what we need to do in order to move forward. And I think as Kurt has articulated, those tentpole players, and I go back to what Bruce Arena would say. I talked to him quite a bit, and one of the first things he told me that I experienced when I went to finish my career in LA, and he keeps saying, in this league, in order to be a successful team, your big players have to be big players, given the makeup of how the structure of the salary cap and all this stuff. And so that's going to be true. He's been doing this for years. He's been really successful at what he's done, and I think it's really important, that when you have that designation as a designated player, that comes with a lot of responsibility, and obviously a lot of production is necessary for the rest of the team to kind of move in that direction.
Last thing for me, there were a lot of positives too coming out of this season, but there were some telling stats. RSL led the league, only 3 points come from behind position, gave up almost, I think, the most points from the lead, and then also you gave up a lot of goals in the second half. You didn't score a lot of goals in the second half. What is going to happen next year? Is that a change in the roster? Is it a change in philosophy? What's the change for next year that's going to improve RSL overall?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit of both, right? I spent with the staff a lot of time on game management this year, and I think when you're spending as much time on game management, then it goes to what Kurt was alluding to is you probably need more tentpoles in those moments. The tentpoles have more experience. They can manage games. They can manage emotions, a lot easier than say a young player coming into the game. The young player's just playing the game. He doesn't understand the context of how important this moment is. Even though I'm an attacking player, I'm asked to defend in this moment. Or it's a second phase set piece, but I'm an attacking player. You still have to defend the set piece the right way. And so there was a lot of that this year. And so I think it's a combination of players and again, really being deliberate into how we manage those moments. And we spent quite a bit of time doing game states towards the latter part of the season. But I think a lot of our issues came in the early part where we gave away way too many points from positions of leads. And so, like Kurt was talking about set pieces, that's another area that we have to be deliberate and really talking through and working on so that we don't, again, make the same mistakes that we made this year.
Thank you. Congratulations on your extensions in those 2 hot seats.
Thanks, Brian.
All the time when we talk about roster, we think in the best players. And talking about Diego Luna, we have it for sure, or it's uncertain at this time. It's early to talk about that, but what's the perspective?
To talk about what?
Diego Luna, we have it for sure, because all the time, the rumors, about the players.
Yeah.
So about Diego Luna, was about a lot of just...
Yeah, so you're just asking if he's going to be here next year. At this stage, yes, and things can always change, but nothing right now makes me feel that it's likely for him to leave this offseason. Again, someone comes and offers us 20 million, we're gonna have a serious conversation about stuff like that. But for Diego personally, and I think he probably agrees with this, so maybe it's okay for me to say this. I think as he's trying to make the World Cup team, it's going to be really important for him to consistently be on the field and getting reps and playing games. And it's maybe not the best time to step into a new team mid-season as he's trying to push for that. And I think the national team coach has obviously looked favorably upon not just his but other people's performances in MLS. I think the biggest issue in that respect that he has is the length of our off season, probably. but I think right now this is probably the best place for him to be in terms of trying to get on the I guess on the plane, but the World Cup's here, but to get on the plane to the World Cup.
When we changed the name of the stadium, Don Garber came here. I had the opportunity to talk to him, and he told me, when I asked how I see Real Salt Lake, he said, I see Real Salt Lake like as a protagonist team on the MLS. For me, I know we are on the same page. Protagonism is one, and real candidates another one. And I know what you guys, what Pablo's saying. You say the main, what you think is what you want, and you can find, talking about mentality. So, but sometimes the players has to be a lot, and the most of the time, if you have better players than other ones, you're gonna be in the top. So, I know when Pablo got that team the first time, we got in a final, and that's the one that proves with the players you have, you can do a lot. So to be a protagonism, you have to raise your voice in different teams, playing players, and also complaining about the things happening, because this past season Real Salt Lake was affected with the bad decision of the referees. So do you guys have the way to complain, to raise your voice, and the MLS can hear from Salt Lake and not, say Salt Lake's not all the time we can make mistakes by the referees or something. No, Salt Lake complains. Salt Lake raises his voice, so they can not to, we can be protagonism about that too.
Yeah, great question. I am not a shouter or a complainer typically, and most years I don't talk to the referee, the head of referees, or the liaison at the league at all about the referees, because honestly, like, sometimes it hurts you, sometimes it helps you, and in general it kind of evens out. And I talk to both of those people more than I really want to this year. Obviously they put out some some videos earlier in the year regarding some mistakes that not just the referee made, but VAR made as well, and it's of course extra upsetting when you have a system like VAR, which is supposed to be a second look to get things correct, still get it wrong, and then have the referees come out and admit it later, and then even in moments later in the season where I thought they didn't do that, but we're still in the same situation. So it's one of the things, when I say this was an incredibly frustrating season, that was one of the incredibly frustrating aspects of it. And as Pablo said, and he was alluding to kind of penalty kick shootouts, but it applies here as well. The margins are razor thin, and if you just look at things like the red card maybe in the Nashville game, and the wrongfully received red card we got in the Toronto game, you flip those two results and it changes everything about where we finish the season in the standings. So I don't want to sit up here and put blame there in any way, because there were a lot of moments where we failed to help ourselves. But it's just worth illustrating how thin the margins are and can be. And to your point, yes, those issues and concerns are raised and brought up. The reality is there's very little that can be done after the fact. I think we maximize that by getting Diego's red card rescinded and his suspension pulled, and really, like, that's it. That's like the bulk of our remedy, and so that's really unfortunate that there really isn't much remedy beyond that. But to the extent that it's cathartic and makes us feel better, it definitely made my and our displeasure known to the league about that.
Anybody else? Yes, Leonard.
This is for Coach and Kurt. There's been a lot of talk about what RSL can improve on, but nobody expected RSL to make their fifth straight playoff appearance. With that being said, I believe it's fifth straight, right, Kurt? Okay, sure. From both you guys' perspectives, as a coach and a director, what are some strengths that you believe will roll over to next season, whether it be on the field or off the field, that fans can look forward to?
That will roll over from this season to next season? Do you want to take that on the field?
Well, I just think that, I think if you look at, the engine room of our team, it's a really young team, and I think something to be excited about is the continued growth of young players that are impacting not only our team, but the international game with the U.S. national team. And I think that's really, really exciting, especially with, the World Cup around the corner. And so that for me is something that you can rely upon, that is going to get better. Their character, not only players, but character people in the locker room. And, a guy like Rafa Cabral, who's brought in a wealth of experience and is now the leader of that locker room, that will continue to make that place better. And so as we continue to add really important players to our roster, you've got a great foundation, an exciting group of young players, and a group that's motivated to continue to build upon, making the playoffs, but also now going beyond that to where we can be a top 4 team in the West year after year.
Yeah, I mean, I'll reiterate that. Like, having Rafa here from, having him be here in his second year will actually change, I think, how he affects the team, because he's such a good, respectful guy. When he came in, he obviously exudes professionalism, and that leadership is a part of his character and who he is, but he's not like stepping on people's toes, and he's trying to figure out kind of the hierarchy and what things are here. And now that he knows that, I think his impact and influence will get magnified. And then I think, if you go back a couple years, and I couldn't even tell you maybe who this is, but, I think one positive that we've had in terms of, especially to back up us being a developmental club, is sort of each year, in the last couple of years, we've had 1 or 2 players emerge that I don't think anyone really saw emerging prior to the season or expected to play a big role. And so I guess the excitement going next year is maybe who's that going to be next year, who's the next guy up, and being excited for that guy and how he comes, as well as the continued development of guys like Gozo and Diego.
So you've talked about playoff being the standard, right? We got to get into the playoffs. What is our focus on those other trophies throughout the year? The Leagues Cup, U.S. Open, that open stuff. What are we focusing on?
Yeah, listen, I think, again, we go in every year to try to win trophies. That's always the objective in every, and I think the balance is always trying to balance out the league play versus depending on when those tournaments come up, and I think, again, you go to Leagues Cup this year and literally didn't qualify to the next round by a goal that America scored in the last, 2 seconds of the game. And so again, when we talk about these things like trophies and what does it take, you have to be incredibly fortunate because the margins are so thin. It's not like we're getting outplayed in these things and we have no chance of winning. We have just as much chance as anyone else that goes through. And so then it just comes down to these little fine moments. But I think, again, if you go to that Leagues Cup, and I think we were hard done not to get through, but it literally came down to the last 10 seconds. So I think moving forward, regardless of what tournament that we're in, we talk about it with, Kurt and Jay, and we talked about it going into this Leagues Cup, is we want to make sure we put our best foot forward in this thing. So it's not like we're sloughing off any trophy. We have to do it, but again, our roster is so big, and then you have all the injuries, and the time of the Leagues Cup is always late in the season where guys are running on fumes, and we have to try to get that balance right. But I'll just tell you and the rest of the fan base is that there's not one trophy that we take lightly around here, and we try to do the best we can given where we're at and the players that are available to put our best foot forward to win these things.
Thank you.
I mean, I actually want to add on to that. It's a huge emphasis for us, and the place where I spent the most time in this league was in Seattle, right, so far, and I spent 9 years there. And the first 4 years, I think it was the first 4 years, we won the Open Cup each year, and so I know all too well what that moment can bring to a club and the players and the staff and the fans, and whether it's an Open Cup, it's MLS Cup, Supporter Shield, Leagues Cup, obviously CCL, whatever it is, you can't take those moments away when you win those trophies. And so it's a huge emphasis for us to go into every competition, whether it's a league, a knockout stage, a group stage, whatever it is, and try to win it. And I think it would be great to, and I know that there are fans that appreciate that and that put similar value on it, but I would love for this the stadium to be as full as it is for a league game, for an Open Cup game, and make the players feel that intensity as well, right? Because sometimes we tell them, hey, this is a big deal, and then if they go out and there's 4 fans there, sometimes they don't feel like it's as big a deal. So I would maybe challenge a little bit there, like, hey, let's make that feel like a big deal too. But I feel like it's a big deal, and I know Pablo feels like a big deal, and Jason as well. We've talked about this a ton. Like, we want to win trophies, and we want to win the ultimate trophies, right? We want to win MLS Cup. We want to win, ideally CCL at some point. Like, we want to shoot for the top, but we also know that sometimes, the fewest number of games to win is maybe the Open Cup or the Leagues Cup, and we put no less emphasis on those things.
Anybody else? Thank you, gentlemen, for all your time today and all year long.
Thank you. Appreciate it, guys.
That concludes today's event.